Well, a new hurricane is gaining strength in the Atlantic Ocean. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said Hurricane Irma is now a Category 3 storm. Officials also warned that Irma is expected to be extremely dangerous for the next several days. So CBS News weather producer David Parkinson joins us now to talk about Irma. We don't even want to hear about another storm, but now we have Irma turning up. Tell me about the storm. What do I need to know?
So right now it is a storm in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So here's the satellite. Here's Hurricane Irma. It's 900 miles off the coast of Africa and 1,600 miles from the Antilles. So it's out over fishes. That's the good news, right? And so for the next 4 or 5 days, as it continues to intensify, it's going to stay over empty water. The question really becomes, once it gets closer to the Antilles, gets closer to Puerto Rico towards the later end of the week, that's when we start having a chance where it could impact land and really cause some damage.
Well, this is what I've learned from listening to people like you, that a storm like this over water, especially warm water, feeds its intensity. So it's a Category 3 now. It's not going to stay a Category 3.
No. So the official National Hurricane Center forecast takes it up to a Category 4. You can see in that graphic there of 140 mile-an-hour winds by Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
There are some models that are saying this could get to a Category 5. So it really comes down to this question of
Category 5?
Yeah, Category 5.
Wow.
So this could just max out the scale. And then we talk about a whole new set of it creates its own atmosphere. It's a whole different situation. Yeah. But over the next couple of days, it went from a tropical storm to a Category 2 hurricane in a span of 6 hours. It almost doubled in wind speed, from 60 mile-an-hour winds to 115 mile-an-hour winds in a period of 24 hours. So this storm really is supercharged and ready to go.
Yeah, okay, she sounds scary, Irma, but she's only going to be really, really scary if she is headed towards land. So what are the models? What are the models showing?
Right, so if you, I set up this nice little graphic that we have there. So there are your possible options, right? So it could go into the Gulf of Mexico, it could make landfall on the East Coast, or it could recurve out to sea.
So worst case scenario, that bottom half of Florida and these Gulf states are going to get nervous.
Potentially. So the good news is that bottom option there, the one into the Gulf of Mexico, is, at least as model runs have come along, are less likely. So it has gone from a somewhat decent chance to less of a chance. That middle chance right now is still, unfortunately, the most likely. The problem is we don't know where it could hit in the U.S. It could go anywhere from pretty much Montauk to Miami at this point.
Wow.
So that's really unclear. The big question is going to be the setup, right? So we've got a ridge of high pressure, and that's over the Atlantic Ocean. It's a Bermuda high. And the question is, you see that giant gap there on that map there? That's the ridge of high pressure. How far west does that ridge hit, and how far down does it go? And that kind of will dictate the track past where the National Hurricane Center has it. Then you see that little blue thing in that upper left-hand corner of that graphic? That's a trough, and that's the dip in the jet stream. The timing of that and where that slides through will also impact of where it's going to send the storm.
Okay.
It could be too late. It could basically be a non-factor, and then the high takes over, and that's a really bad situation for land.
Okay, just remind us, when does hurricane season end?
Hurricane season ends on November 30th, and the peak of hurricane season is September 10th, which somewhat ironically is around the time where we'd be looking for landfall if it were to hit the United States.
Wow. David Parkinson, thank you so much.
No problem.
Well, the name Irma comes from Old German. It means the war goddess. And of course, that's appropriate because this storm, as you can see, is already a monster. It's a Category 3 right now with wind speeds at about 15 miles per hour. Aisha Sky joins us now. This storm is still pretty far out, Aisha, but what's the outlook for the next few days at least?
It is still far out, Phil, but we're going to have to pay very close attention to this system, mainly because it gets close to the southeast coastline, but not until, we'll say, the latter part of next week. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. I do want to show you the latest update. This is from the National Hurricane Center, the 5 o'clock advisory. It's 790 miles east of the Leeward Islands. Now, there are already hurricane watches posted for the northern Leeward Islands, and I'll put a track on it for you. You'll notice it continues and is forecasted to strengthen into a Category 4 hurricane as we head into Tuesday, and then it stays just north of Hispaniola, still as a Category 4 storm, and then approaching the Bahamas as a Category 4 storm on Friday. And notice winds up to 130 miles per hour, but beyond Friday, there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of where this storm is going to go, and this can change. We'll keep you updated not only on TV but also online and on our social media pages. So again, we'll keep you posted on Irma and what changes may come with that particular storm.
First at 5 tonight, Harvey continues to push off to the northeast tonight, but we are all keeping our eyes out in the mid-Atlantic because we're watching Hurricane Irma.
So let's check in now with Tim Deegan, our First Coast News storm expert. Tim, what can you tell us?
Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you, Anthony. We're going to get right to Irma, but I do want to talk about a severe thunderstorm that we've had in Flagler County. There it is, right on the coast, about ready to head offshore. And this is part of a cluster of thunderstorms that did cause some wind damage during the day today. I'll get back in a bit and talk about our own thunderstorms, but let's talk about Irma. Irma, a Category 3 hurricane. We talked about the fact that for a while it's going to have some fluctuations. Briefly was a Category 2, now a Category 3. For the next several days, folks, just know it's going to be a strong, intense hurricane. It's not large yet, but it is eventually expected to get even larger and possibly more intense. Now, there's a lot of numbers. Don't let that confuse you. We will talk about that as it goes. I know for most of us, the big question is, what about the 5-day cone? Again, the 5-day cone takes Irma in 5 days to what we call the Lesser Antilles. Think maybe the Virgin Islands. After that, very near, if not over, Puerto Rico. And then we wonder. Again, that's 5 days away. So 5 days away, Hurricane Irma, a major hurricane, I suspect at that point still. Maybe a Category 3, maybe a Category 4. Can't rule out a Category 5. Intense, like the movies, and I mean that in a dramatic way, but still 5 days away, still 1,500 miles away. What is Irma going to do? Big ifs, but I can break it down for you. This is what I think. I think there's a 30% chance that Irma will head towards South Florida and then recall off to the northeast. I'm now going to give it even odds, 30% chance that it turns well east of us, but then impacts in a big way the northeast. That would be anyway from the Chesapeake Bay to New England. But there's a legitimate 20% chance that it recurves and heads into the Atlantic. Notice that doesn't add up to 100. That's because a lot of ifs still left. We'll talk about the whys and then even settle down and talk about our Labor Day weather in just a few moments.
Now issuing watches and warnings and a track for Irma, and we are paying close attention to this because over the next 5 to 7 days, this will come very close to the Lesser Antilles, as well as the Dominican Republic, the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and perhaps could affect here in the U.S. So that's something we're going to have to watch. Irma is next.
Let's talk about it now. The 11 a.m. advisory here has it already with winds at 50 miles an hour, and it is expected to become a hurricane by Friday morning, a Category 1 hurricane. And then from there, there's a lot of speculation whether it goes farther north or farther south. Why? Well, the computer models. Each line you see here is a different rendering of the scenario that could play out. Some, as it gets towards the end of this forecast period, goes a little bit farther north, and some go a little farther south. This time of the year, it's almost just as important to see the strength and the positioning of something called a Bermuda high that sits over the middle parts of the Atlantic. If it was to be rather weak, that'll usually drive these systems to move west and then do that little loop out to sea, and we call it a fish storm at that point. If it's just a little bit stronger and positioned a little bit farther towards the west, it'll actually push it right towards the eastern seaboard. If it's really, really strong, then it'll push it even farther to the west and way south of our region and into the Gulf of Mexico.
Very powerful storm, and tonight a hurricane watch has been issued for parts of the Leeward Islands. CBS 4 meteorologist Dave Warren has the latest on Irma. Dave.
Yeah, we'll closely watch this here over the next few days. Certainly right now it's maintaining its intensity and even wobble a little farther south here. We'd like to see this start to turn north as it continues to move west. Here is the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. 115-mile-an-hour wind. That's moving west at 14 miles an hour, just under 800 miles to the east of the Leeward Islands. The important forecast track here continues to take it a little farther south, intensify it, and then start to turn it a little farther north. This goes out 5 days, fairly certain initially of this initial motion, but we'll continue to watch this closely, especially Wednesday and Thursday, because the storm's still forecast to move towards the Bahamas, maintaining, in fact, could be increasing its intensity and growing in size. Certain that it'll be around the Bahamas here, this general area, by the end of the week. Computer forecasts are in pretty good agreement of that. Even the global models show this. But then Saturday to Sunday, things get a little tricky here. They start to try to drift north. So with new information coming in and the 5-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center starting Wednesday to Thursday, you want to keep a close eye on that. It'll really give us a good indication about where the storm could be headed once it gets a little closer to the southeast coast. Also helping, the flights are started here from the National Hurricane Center. They're flying through the center of the storm, feeding back new information. They found a pressure of 961 millibars there at just about 5:30. These flights will continue, and all of that information goes into these forecasts, which will continually update here over the next few days. Radar, well, that's tracking just a few showers and storms across the area. They are mainly inland. We'll see high clouds coming into the area from those. But it looks like a pretty quiet night tonight. The showers will diminish after sunset, and the temperatures, which are in the mid-80s, will drop into the upper 70s. But then we have a more typical pattern with more showers and storms this weekend. Of course, that new information that comes in with the hurricane forecast. I'll have an update on that, show you what it means for our extended forecast when I come back a little bit later.
But right now we're going to talk about the weather and whether that's affecting things not only for that event tonight, but also, of course, Irma, and we're watching lots of different trajectories.
Yes,
Lauren.
that is right. So we just recently got the 5 o'clock update. I've been trying to digest the data and look at all of the different model runs that we've seen today. And unfortunately, a slight west-southwestward shift in the track. So yes, that cone is getting awfully close to the continental United States at this point. New with the latest advisory, we do have hurricane watches in effect for the Leeward Islands, and at this point we have a very powerful major hurricane that is moving towards the west at about 14 miles per hour. And actually, hurricane hunters out there today, they flew out of Barbados, and this is why they are just invaluable this time of year, actually showing a minimum central pressure that is lower than what was I guess you could say just inferred from our satellite and our radar data. So that is good to know because it actually shows that this storm is a bit stronger than what we were just suggesting through the data just looking at the satellite. It is expected to increase in intensity as it heads toward the Leeward Islands, impacting them by at least Tuesday evening. Now after that, the forecast is highly uncertain. There's a whole lot of things that are happening here with this system. So although it's bold, it is tough to kind of give everyone a bit of an idea of what may happen, okay? And a lot can change because it is a week out. You might remember Hurricane Harvey's forecast when it was a week out. It changed and it shifted towards the north. So at this point, there is about a 40% chance that it'll be about 150 miles off of the Jacksonville coast by next weekend. Still about a 20% chance that it could go towards South Florida and a 20% chance that it will recurve out to sea. Jeff, we'll talk more about Hurricane Irma coming up in just a bit.